Hello and welcome to the Auditing Antics podcast. So today's a topic that we're really dealing with a lot. And Michelle, I find that when I'm out speaking or working with different groups, I get a lot of questions about how do we avoid the audits. And there's a large misunderstanding currently of what this looks like in the industry. So today we're really going to tackle that to try to help break that down. If you work in the industry on the revenue side, this is something you're probably familiar with already, but we
Mhm.
really need to start pushing this information out more to our providers, to administrators, people that we work with that don't see that revenue cycle every day, and
Mhm.
making sure that everyone truly understands the fact that these algorithms are out there. They're running constantly on claims data, and you're not going to be able to get away from it. And, Michelle, that's still a common misunderstanding that people can hide under the radar.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that with the introduction of AI as well, I know that's I feel like everybody talks about AI, but I think what they don't realize is that now they're actually able to take it even deeper than just the analytics that we're going to be talking about today. So you definitely aren't going to be able to hide. It's no longer a group of claims that has potential to be looked at, but one singular claim could be popping up on somebody's radar in the payer realm for one reason or another. So it's really important to start digging into this and start paying attention to how they are analyzing our claims.
Yeah, one other thing that I think is really important to understand too is that you could be flagged in an audit process for undercoding just like you can for overcoding. And a lot of
Yes.
people have a misunderstanding where, they'll be like, wait, what? They're going to flag me because they owe me more money? But we have to think about what that means if you are purposefully undercoding. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really skewing the data that's going out about the patients. So if you think about payer data, and we think about the process of risk adjustment, for example, we talk all the time about having proper diagnosis and specificity to show what it truly will take to care for that patient. You're
Mm-hmm.
skewing that data when you are constantly undercoding, thinking that you are staying under somebody's radar, which isn't even where we're at these days. So we have to have
And
accuracy. It's not
yes,
over or under.
it's funny you bring that up because I have a client that I'm doing audits for, and they don't want to hold undercoding against their providers. And it's like, this is just as bad as overcoding. It should be considered a variance against them, and you should be educating them, not just because it's a loss of revenue, but for the reasons that you stated there. And it's important that people are paying the same for the service that are rendered across the board. I think that's something that you have to consider too. And I don't think that's how they look at it per se, is that it's not fair that this person pay for the level 4 and then this person received the same service but paid for a level 3.
Yeah.
The payers are going to question that, and they're going to be like, well, why did I pay for the level 4 when when they only had to pay for the level 3? So there's so much more that goes into undercoding than just thinking you're sneaking by, like, oh, we don't have to look at any of these level 3s. No need to worry about those.
Yeah. Yeah. We got to rethink
Okay.
that plan.
Okay.
So when we're thinking about the analytics part of everything, we really need to focus on the fact that, like I was saying before, all of the claims data is being captured and looked at. And one thing I like to tell my clients when I'm working with them in different areas that are of risk, I like to tell them, this information going out is making it so that there's a lot of assumptions that are going to be made about you and about your patient. And I could request a utilization report and start making all of these assumptions about what's going on just based on levels of service, the
Mm-hmm.
CPT codes, the modifiers, the diagnoses. And a lot of times what they are looking at is going to be something that is driving higher revenue. So if a payer is paying out a lot to one particular practitioner, for example, or if we have certain types of services, if we think about wound care, which we won't go into that today, but the whole reason that wound care is so easily targeted by the UPICs is because we have Q codes that directly go to those graphs. And if we look at reports, there's extremely high dollars attached to wound care. So when we think about it that way, or if we have people who are incorrectly using incident two, for example, and one physician's NPI number has, 100 claims a day underneath it, that's going to be questionable as far as, what that physician's actually doing,
Mm-hmm.
their involvement is, if those patients are really stable. And remember, not every payer even recognizes incident two. So you could be billing under that physician thinking that, you're getting around credentialing or you're getting paid more. But if that payer accepts that type of provider and enrolls in credentials, then you have that obligation. You don't get to just pick and choose that you want to bill under a physician. So we have to think about this in terms of commercial payers as well as government with CMS, and really break apart what these trends could end up looking like, which we're going to talk about some of that.
Hmm. So I think there's kind of this myth surrounding audits that they are random, and a provider will receive an audit request, and they will start to ask questions like, why did I get picked? What did I do wrong? With the assumption that the audit is reactive in a sense. So
Mhm.
they did something. Maybe there was a complaint filed against them, or somebody made an allegation against them. But in all actuality, audits are often not reactive. They're based on the data that has been collected and what the data is showing. So I think that's really important to keep in mind, is they aren't going to be reactive. It's not random that you are receiving this audit request.
Yeah, and there's also, we should probably do an episode on this coming up soon here. I have a webinar that I present sometimes about being ready for external audits and what the different departments from the government, for example, means. On the commercial side, we don't have to look around as much because we've got the special investigative units, the SIU departments, that
Mm-hmm.
are looking for fraud, waste, abuse, for everything. But with CMS, for example, if you have a cert letter coming in, that is telling you the data that has been run. They're showing that you're an
Mm-hmm.
outlier for a certain reason when they've done the benchmarking, and they give you some insight into what is looking off in the numbers that they're looking at. Um,
Mm-hmm.
with something with CMS like a UPIC, a RAC, things like that, that's because they've got concerns. It could be a whistleblower. It could be that they have strong concerns of fraud. Doesn't mean that's what it is, but that sends a different signal. So what we're talking about more today is actually happening more consistently on the commercial payer side. Definitely CMS if you get things like the certs, but we're seeing this activity on the commercial side where they're looking at, like Michele was saying, they're looking at trends. They may reach out and just ask your billing department for records for one patient encounter, and that could be a part of these types of reviews that are taking place.
Mhm. So when we're talking about data and what they are analyzing, they're looking at claims across specialties. It could be region specific, provider types. They're looking at what are your levels of this CPT code that you're billing compared to your peers. So they're looking for those deviations in your data. And it's not that they're necessarily looking for you doing something wrong. So just because you are an outlier doesn't mean that you are doing it incorrectly. And I think that's important to note as well, that you may receive these these audit requests or documentation requests because statistically you do stand out, but it doesn't mean that there's going to be something punitive as a result of it. It's more about comparison than it is about intent. And I think a lot of times they just automatically think that the intent is because they're being told they're doing something wrong. And it's really not. It's just that the data made them stand out. And it's just a fact that your billing patterns do make you visible when it comes to data. And that is how they kind of trend these things and how they can identify a red flag, an outlier, to start looking at something. Because let's be honest, if there wasn't some kind of, mathematics behind it, I guess is what you would call it, it would be kind of hard to just randomly say, well, we're going to put all the providers in this, those spin things that you see for,
Yeah.
for awards, and then we're going to hit stop, and whoever it stops on is ours today. That's just not how it is. And so this, we're going to talk later on about what you should do, but it's, you should be paying attention to your utilization and billing patterns and things so that you can kind of get ahead of something like this, or be aware that something like this may be coming.
Well, and it's a good point because this is also the exact reason why small practices are no longer under the radar. I've
Mm-hmm.
had conversations with people before and they're like, how did I become a target? I'm a one practitioner group, or I've got myself and two others. And again, nobody can stay under the radar anymore. They're comparing you to yourself, to your peers. And it's something where if you have an outlier in whatever way it may be, it's going to be a trigger. So it could be
Mm-hmm.
the type of service that you render. It could be the levels you choose to bill. If it's you and two other practitioners, is that physician billing everything? With mid-sized practices, do you have multiple locations and one NPI number is billing for mid-levels in multiple different locations? All of those types of things are very easily identified, not only in data, but now we add in the component of AI, which makes it easier to process the data. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how, we're seeing a lot of this activity here.
Yeah. So there are certain things that I would say are common triggers. I don't know if you would agree with that, but there are certain things that I think you could anticipate causing you to be an outlier. And the first thing that comes to mind is the levels of service that you are billing. Like I said before, when they're looking at the numbers, they aren't looking at context. So say there is, say there's a provider in your practice and you identified through internal reviews that they were massively underbilling. Well, you provided them with education and now they have changed their billing patterns. That could be something that would generate a red flag when there is a big change or a big shift in how they're coding their E&M levels of service. Once again, just because it's identified as a red flag doesn't mean it's wrong. So if there's going to be like this big shift, you and I both have dealt with those providers who also go to these seminars and come back with all these brilliant ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So and so stood up there and said that I could bill this, I could bill that. This supports a level 5 or a level 4, and I've been billing it as a level 3, and all of it, there's these big shifts that can change for one reason or another. That is something that could generate a red flag. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't adjust our billing patterns if there's a need to. No, you need to make sure that your billing is compliant, even if that means it's going to potentially generate a red flag that may make you an outlier. The other thing that this is kind of one that gets under my skin is modifier usage, a common trigger. So I see a lot in my auditing overutilization of the 25 modifier. I feel like people are like, I'm just gonna tack this on here and hope that this gets paid. And a lot of times when we're auditing, we're running it through the NCCI edit checker, and there is no NCCI edit between the E&M and the CPT code that is supported, and they've still appended the 25 modifier. So that is something that could cause them to take a look and see, why are they using the 25 modifier so much? Same thing for the 59 modifier on procedures. You have to make sure that documentation supports unbundling that CPT code when you are applying that 59 modifier. So you want to make sure that you're not overutilizing and that you're using them correctly. I think that that is the main thing. I know I have seen, much to my horror, back in my this is just an example. In my early years of coding, I was sitting in and just observing our insurance department, and the lady was working denials, and she's like, oh, I've gotten this one back so many times. I've changed the diagnosis code. I've done this. And she's like, I'm just going to put a 25 modifier on it, or 15. I think it was a 59 modifier on it, and send it out the door. And I'm like, huh? Like,
Yeah.
like, this isn't how this works at all. And I'd also like to note those diagnosis codes. She's like, look at here, and it's past medical history. It's I'm like, this person needs some training about where they can. And I ended up actually being the person to do that training, to teach, those different departments how to
Yeah.
properly look at documentation and where it was okay to pull this data from, and when you should phone a friend to have them take a look at it and see, maybe it just shouldn't be paid. Sometimes it's just not supported, and that's okay. Or maybe there's a completely different issue that you're not even looking at or recognizing. And I know that's not the case for everybody, but that was kind of like a horror story that I experienced, where I was like,
Yeah, exactly.
uh,
Don't do it. Don't do it.
uh how much do I want to say in this moment?
Right. Well, and to your point about new services, that's something where I talk with a lot of people about doing due diligence. I prefer it when I meet clients early on before they implement something. Just last week, I met with a group who was thinking about doing Incident 2, and we all know the pitfalls of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we slowed down, we talked about it, and through the discussion, the physicians were like, oh, wait, this could put work on our plates in addition to the NP we're working with and things like that. So they started to think about it more critically from a workflow perspective, which is what we hope people will do
Yes.
in this industry. So when we think about these billing patterns and trying to mitigate risk is a good way to say it.
Yeah.
The only thing we can do is make sure that you are aware of what it is you're implementing. You're getting some kind of external input, meaning outside of the source of where you first heard about it or where that physician first heard about it. So many times the seminars you were referring to are led by physician consultants who claim
Mm-hmm.
that they know the revenue system, but unless they've worked in certain positions and worked closely with AR departments, they don't truly have the full viewpoint of what compliance is from a coding and billing standpoint, and they still are thinking heavy on the clinical side, and that leads to a lot of errors. So in the past, we've talked about having different departments and different people come to the table when you're making these decisions. This is why it's so important, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to be about avoiding, if you start a new service line and if you think about all of a sudden this CPT code pops up in your billing data, there's a high volume coming out, whether it's a high dollar service or not, they have a high volume of a particular CPT code that could trigger a review. And when that's looked at, the question is going to be, did you prepare properly? Did you set up your templates properly? Is documentation compliant so they'll move on? Or is that now going to become a problem for you because you thought you knew before you jumped in and now we have a problem? You
Mhm.
know, I was having a conversation with a different client last week, and they were asking some questions about particular service that they were being audited for. And they had a partner in the industry that was looking at starting to bill for the same thing. And they said, well, should we not tell them about this? You know, is it going to scare them away because of audits and things like that? And I had a whole conversation with them about how realistically in this industry, if your goal is to completely 100% avoid an audit, then don't go into business or close shop, because we're not going to be avoiding audits. And, you know, it's just not realistic anymore to think that you could practice medicine for 20 years and not have anybody come in and take a look in one way or
Mhm.
another. Because remember, it can be a single claim. It doesn't have to be a 20 chart request, a 30 chart
Yep.
request. They're constantly doing this, whether they're stopping claims, asking for documentation, whether they're auto downcoding, which is happening a ton right now. All of that's occurring. And Michelle, as a part of going into the solutions for this, you know, one of the things that I find is that a lot of practices are not paying enough attention on the back end, meaning
Mhm.
they have someone who's working the revenue cycle who's not properly trained or not properly supported, which is, you know, that's to the fault of the practice and the owner of the practice. You can't just bring people that do not have
Mhm.
experience and say, okay, this is the work, figure it out, get it done. If
Yeah.
if you're going to do that, you've got to support them. You've got to provide the proper resources. So there's a disconnect there. And then when there is outsourced billing that's taking place and they're not truly following up on the back end, this just completely dismantles everything.
Yeah, I know you have told me about meetings you've had where it's been outsourced and it's come to light that they're just writing off things instead of appealing them. And so it's not, I I hate it when people are like, "Oh, I hired so and so to do this. They take care of it for me." No, this affects you. You need to be a part of it. Just like talking about incident 2, that is not nothing about the revenue cycle is hands off. And you should not be wanting to take a hands off approach to it. Even if you work in a larger facility, you should still be using the tools that they give to monitor your billing patterns.
Mhm.
If you're not doing your own coding, I know I have worked with physicians before who keep on top of that monitor. They reach out with questions. I can remember one time a provider was freaking out saying I wasn't coding his bronchoscopies correctly, contacted administration, and then come to find out where he was looking in his system only showed him the first code that was billed. That was a fun time. But he was on top of it. He was asking
Right.
the questions. Maybe don't run to administration. Maybe call the person who's doing the coding or handling the revenue side of things, the compliance side of things, but nothing about this is hands off. You
Right.
need to be looking at it, and it is just as important as treating your patient.
Well, and I think about this in ways when I do, for example, a revenue cycle review for a client. It's really looking at the beginning of an encounter with that patient coming in, all the
Mm-hmm.
way through to the ends of that claim being hopefully paid and adjusted however needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
So in that process, I really like to dig in and say, okay, whether you're doing your billing internally or externally, how are you overseeing that? You know, what tools are available to you in your practice management system where you can do something very similar on a regular basis. Typically, for example, a good way to look at this is going to be maybe at the end of the week. And not only are you able to see trends in billing, you can see the patterns of your providers. If you have coding and billing staff, you can see things like their productivity by doing this. You can look at their
Mhm.
accuracy. You can look at, how much is bouncing out, how many denials do you have, how many rejections. So the same way, yes, payers may have that more automated on their side, but the same way that they're taking a look at your information critically, what are you doing internally to do the same, to
Mhm.
make sure that you're
Yeah.
mitigating that risk and getting on top of it ahead of time?
Yeah, and I know in a past life, I used to do that monthly, where I would look at, I had a group of specialties that were offices, specialties that were assigned to me. And monthly, I had to go review the provider's utilization. If I noticed there was a trend that was kind of out there or an outlying provider, I had to take that review a little bit further. I had to look at modifier utilization. I would go and look at schedules to make sure that we were having complete code capture for the services that were being billed, as well as paying attention to those high dollar procedures, drugs, things like that, to make sure that they were being billed correctly. Because it's not just about anticipating something from a payer, but you could also be losing a significant amount of revenue if a workflow is not working how it's supposed to. A lot of things within Epic, for example, are automated, and claims are going right out the door where there isn't 100% coding review being done. So it's so important that you're looking at these things on a regular basis. It can help you be proactive if there is going to be some type of audit that's coming down the line because you're an outlier, some type of request. It can help you be proactive in those and anticipate that something is going to happen and fix problems before you get to the audit portion of things.
And if you're not able to get in front of it ahead of time like that, then dive in and start looking at, especially I'm thinking about large hospital organizations or
Mhm.
multi specialty outpatient practices. Sometimes the volume is just so large that that also seems really hard to tackle. So think about it in terms of the trends. If
Mhm.
you are running those reports and you see trends in downcoding, you see trends in record requests, sometimes you can tell if that payer essentially has you on pre-bill holds without officially telling you, just by the way that they're requesting records.
Yeah.
Maybe it's for a certain service or maybe it's for a certain practitioner, but you need to be very proactive and hands-on in that process. And, we talk all the time, and I know I always sound like a broken record, but you've got to have audit oversight. This is a main reason why, as a part of your contracts with the payers, with the government, they're expecting you to have your own compliance plan, which includes audit monitoring. And, a really big part of that, even if you have a department that is built internally, you need that external input. Last week, I got to speak at the AHLA conference with Amanda from BMD. And, we talked a little bit about the fact that if you have insight internally, or oversight, I should say, internally, and you're constantly getting reports coming across your desk that look amazing and everything's accurate, the scoring's great, the providers are doing great, the coders are doing great, you need to question that, because there should always be something where there's room for improvement in some way or another,
Yeah.
especially in large organizations. So
Yeah.
you've really
I
got to have that other word in there.
this makes me think of something, and it's a client that I currently am auditing for, and they will do everything to try to get their provider to pass. And it's like, are you doing anybody any favors by trying to skirt that line and trying to make something out of their documentation that just is not there.
Right.
The whole point of these reviews is to identify deficiencies and areas for improvement. So you're not doing anybody any favors by trying to make things more favorable for the provider. In the end, if their documentation is not supporting what they're billing, that is an issue and it needs to be addressed. It there's just no question about that. So it can kind of be frustrating to me sometimes when, people employ an outside auditing company and then it's like, no, we're not going to listen to anything you said. We do it this way. This is how you have to make your result. We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
Mm-hmm. That happens too much. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe if you're worried about hurt feelings, you should work on how you're approaching them with their audit results.
Yes.
Maybe it's not my audit result that's the problem.
Yeah, I know. Well, and that's the other
Uh,
reason that external input is so important,
yes,
because people that are internal do tend to hesitate more, or they
they
know their
do.
providers more, so they make assumptions they shouldn't be.
Yes.
You know, we I had a situation where one particular provider was being treated specially, and the client didn't like that I called it out that way. But the reality was is this guy was in administration, he's a physician, he's a lead physician, and he's choosing to undercode everything because for him it was easier. Well, how do you lead and represent that, position between clinical and coding and billing when that's your own stance and you could be an outlier in your own organization? So I know exactly what you're saying because
Yeah.
there's too many times that happens. But
It's so frustrating.
yeah,
Nobody is above compliance.
right. Right.
Nobody is above following the rules. And that's that's so important to keep in mind. And maybe you have to get others involved if this provider isn't going to, like, I know we've sat in on meetings together, Stephanie, where they're going to give us a lot of crap about this. They don't listen to anything we have to say. Well, then it's time that you don't go alone to
Mhm.
that meeting, and you have to get the appropriate partners on board, and there's no option but to comply. Unfortunately, it's their job. It's part of their
Right.
job. It's reality. And sometimes those conversations need to be had by the appropriate people. Me as a compliance auditor is not the one to be talking about this is your
Yeah.
job.
Right.
Because that's not my job. And that's just going to be a disaster waiting to happen. So have the appropriate partners on deck to help with those conversations.
Mhm. So, as the main takeaway, just look at what it is that you all are currently doing to oversee these different types of triggers that are happening based on the data, and go back and really look at, the workflow of how it's
Mm-hmm.
being monitored. If you don't know, maybe it's not even a part of your position that you would need to follow that. Maybe bring that up in meetings. If you're starting to notice a trend, go to your lead, go to your supervisor, say, hey, I'm in these notes every day. I'm starting to see this, whether you're coding. This could also be for those that are working in billing teams in the AR, in the
Yeah.
back end side of
Yep.
things. If you are seeing denial trends, things like that, don't sit there quietly and continue to work them. Bring that to the table and see how you all can look at that and look for a solution.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
All right, so that's everything for this week. I hope everyone has a good end of your week, and we will see you back next week. Michelle, next week I think we should come back with an update on the challenges that we've had for ourselves. I will say I'm not doing well right now, so we will.
Wait. So you didn't start on Monday?
I did. I did. The question is, did I continue past Monday?
Is it one of those things? This is day 1 of no soda. This is day 2 of no soda. This is day 1 of no soda.
Yes. I will say that is how it's going without much progress. So
hey,
maybe next week we'll have a better update.
Yeah. We're shooting for progress, not perfection, folks. And I don't think we're the ones to look to for inspiration of New Year's resolutions.
Habit changing.
Hey, one thing I have done is slept on my grounding mat every night. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Slept on it every night. Is it attached to my bed? Yes. Do I sleep in my bed every night? Also, yes. But I have slept on it every night.
So this is our sign to start day 1 again and see if we have a better update next week.
Why'd you have to go recommending updates on this?
You all can see how we go day to day, how we interact day to day and try to motivate each other. This is how it goes.
Let sleeping dogs lie here, you know.
All right. Well, I hope you all have a good week and good weekend. We'll see you back next week.